Hi, it's Dennis Daly. I've posted over 100 excerpts from some of my more than 250 American montage shows that I did in the 1980s and 90s while at UPI Radio. Recently, I embarked on a fresh series of shows, and here's the second half of one of my new American montage interviews. Our guide, LERON GUBLER, the head of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, had said that the central focus of the Hollywood Walk of Fame was the intersection of Hollywood and Vine. I mentioned to him that years ago I had done an interview with then L.A. Mayor Reardon, and mentioned to him that when you got to Hollywood and Vine, there wasn't much there. The area has undergone a huge rehabilitation in the meantime, much under the guidance of the Chamber of Commerce. And I told LERON GUBLER that it's a good thing because at one time when tourists went there, there wasn't much there.
Absolutely. It has been a challenge for us for many years to turn Hollywood around. Hollywood started into decline after World War II, similar to many urban areas around this nation. As the GIs came home, they moved to the suburbs. Development followed them, and the city centers were basically left empty, and so they went downhill. That happened in Hollywood. And it's very hard to turn a ship around. It's very hard to turn an old downtown around. Hollywood kept going downhill, probably did not hit rock bottom until the late 80s. And then it sat there for a long time. We've been working very hard to get new development in here. We've made a lot of progress, and we have a lot of plans, a lot of goals on where we want to take Hollywood. But there is definitely a there now. And as far as Hollywood, but one of the things when we talk about redevelopment, I tell people we're actually very lucky that redevelopment failed in Hollywood in the 70s, because in Los Angeles, they don't believe in saving anything.
No.
Yeah, when they tried in the 70s, they would have just demolished everything. But because it failed then, everything was basically frozen in place. And so if you go down Hollywood Boulevard today, probably you could say that 80% of the buildings are still original structures. And now that revitalization has taken place, a lot of those buildings are being rehabbed. But we've done a lot of infill. The West End, we have a major project, Hollywood and Highland, with the home of the Academy Awards. And just a year ago, we finished a major development that anchors the eastern end of the boulevard at Hollywood and Vine, which includes a W hotel, new housing, new condos, new restaurants, and it gives a sense of place there.
Well, if I had $1 zillion, it's too late now, I always thought somebody ought to put a Brown Derby, a recreation at Hollywood and Vine, because that's another one of the icons out here, or was at one time.
It absolutely was, and, I've talked to the gentleman before who holds the rights to the Brown Derby, and he just was not willing, at least at the time, to reopen a Brown Derby here. We would love to have that recreated, but as is the case with most famous things such as the Brown Derby, somebody holds the rights, and unless they're willing to do it, it's not going to happen.
You were talking about the way Los Angeles has a penchant for destroying the past. When I worked for United Press International, I lived up at Griffith Park, and I would go the back way out Beverly and take Glendale Boulevard. There used to be on the left a wonderful decaying entrance to the original subway out here, where the train went underground to get downtown. And there were a lot of rock videos and things shot there. Now there's a condo complex. All of the old stanchions that held up the overhead lines, most of those are gone. Some of them are still there. You can still see some of the hooks and the underpasses, but you have to really do urban archaeology oftentimes to see any of that early infrastructure. And it's a shame. And we could talk about the red lines going forever, I guess.
Yeah, that is true. We've tried to preserve history in Hollywood. The Chamber has done its part. We actually, several years ago, put up historic markers along Hollywood Boulevard and Vine Street, identifying some of the historic sites. We spent a lot of money and a lot of research so the tourists and people coming here can know what was significant about these buildings. Almost every old building in Hollywood had some historic feature. For example, the building you are in today with me used to be the Meglin Dance Studios. This was where Gypsy Rose Lee did her dance rehearsals before she'd go perform. And when I first moved here, before we remodeled this for the chamber offices, there were still footprints painted on the floors before we remodeled this building. And so, downstairs was a women's dress shop. Harriet Nelson and Lucille Ball used to shop there. So there's something about each of these buildings, if the buildings could talk. And we're quite proud of getting those signs up. They've actually helped preserve buildings, because once people know what happened there, it's a little bit more meaningful, and some of the property owners have stepped in and restored those buildings.
I forget what they've done with it, but I know when I lived here the first time, there was some debate going on about the old Max Factor building. Well, was that saved and converted to something?
It was. Actually, this happened when I first came to Hollywood back in 1992. Procter & Gamble owned the Max Factor building. They had bought all of the Max Factor company, and they really did not want the building. They sold it, and they gave the collection to a group that were putting together a museum here in Hollywood. And so the Max Factor building was later purchased by a lady named Donnell Dadigan, who loves the history of Hollywood, and it kind of made it her passion to create a museum there. And she has done an incredible job and has some amazing artifacts on the early Hollywood history that are in that building. And she has, in fact, preserved some of the rooms. They used to have a room for blondes and a room for brunettes, and you'd go in there, and the colors were there to accent or to help emphasize women with those complexions. So they've kind of preserved those rooms, and you can see them, and it's a great place to visit and see Hollywood history.
Now, your office here is right next door to another one of those Hollywood icons, and that's the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Do you know how long that's been there? And tell us about its hosting of the Academy Awards.
Yeah, the Roosevelt Hotel was built in the late 20s. It was the first really grand hotel that was built in Hollywood. There were other hotels before it. I'd mentioned the old historic Hollywood Hotel, but they were from another era. They weren't modern. And so you had a lot of celebrities who invested in this hotel, which was built just before the crash and the Great Depression. So I think the first investors lost their shirts on this hotel. But it became a gathering place in Hollywood, and it was the home of the first Academy Awards. The Academy actually had an office in a room which is called the Academy Room today. And the Blossom Room, which was their banquet room, hosted that first Academy Awards, which was a dinner. It was not the same format it is today. And I think Wings was the movie that won the first Oscar back then. So a lot of history at the
Yeah, you see the films, and it's just so laid back. It's exciting, of course, but they announce the honoree, and they make a little speech and sit down, and it's almost dull compared to, of course, some of the Academy Award ceremonies now have problems. I want to ask one more thing before we look outside at some of the stars, and that is, from a sheer economic standpoint, how important is keeping not only the image of Hollywood, but the stars of the Walk of Fame looking nice, of keeping the appearances up here?
Well, it's very important. That's why we put so much effort into it, why we created an assessment district, why we created a trust. Because the Walk of Fame has become an iconic institution. Because we do so many ceremonies, 24 to 30 a year, that go all over the world, in tourist minds, the Walk of Fame is someplace they have to come to see. And so the Walk of Fame has been there through thick and thin, through Hollywood's worst times. It was the one thing we could hang our hat on. And the tourists still come by droves to see the Walk of Fame. And it means a lot to people. We refer to it as sort of as the People's Award. Of all the awards given in Hollywood, this is the only one that's really accessible to the public. You can come out there and touch those stars and know that there's some connection with your favorite hero who was honored to know that you're standing where they may have stood when they got that star. And it's just something special. You see those stars out there and the people that are visiting them, and you can see there's a little bit of magic there. Quite often we talk to sort of hardened reporters, and they don't get it because they just say it's just a piece of concrete, and that's true. That's all it is. But they have to admit there is something that people find that's fascinating with these stars. You see the tourists out there, they spy some person's star, and they just go gaga. They jump up and down and get excited. They have to take their picture.
Well, I noticed some of them are in great proximity to others. As I was walking over here, I'd forgotten that Ed McMahon's is right next to W.C. Field. So what a great combination.
You know, we have a little fun sometimes with where we place the stars. A few years ago, we added another block to the west of us, which had never been incorporated in the Walk of Fame. They installed 30 stars all at once, and one of the stars was the Dead End Kids, so we put that as the last one, the Dead End of the Walk of Fame. And there's a lot of fun as far as where we put stars. We have the Go-Go's coming up, and we're going to put their star in front of the building where they first performed. Jay Leno, when we gave him his star, he asked if his star could be at the corner of Hollywood and Highland because that's where he was arrested for vagrancy. And so there's a lot of fun features as far as the history of some of these stars and why they're located where they're located.
Well, now, I know who most of the people are on the Walk of Fame, I guess because of the business I was in and the fact that I'm older. But is there a chart available? I mean, is it easy to get a map, if you will, and an explanation of the stars, or do you have to look that up on the Internet?
Well, we used to publish a brochure that we'd give out to the tourists. But now with the Internet, everything has become, everybody wants it instantaneous and they want it updated. You print a brochure and it's immediately out of date because we do 24 new stars in 1 year. So if people really want the accurate information on the walk, they should go to our website, walkoffame.com. We have a lot of great information on there, and we just launched it this past year, and it's got some great sort functions that allow people to research. If you want to find out who from your hometown has a star, for example, you can punch that in, or what year somebody who was born in a certain year that has a star, or what college they went to. I mean, there's things you can sort, what year, who got stars in a certain year. And then we've got a biography on the stars, and we're beginning to try to pull information from our archives and put on there as well.
Well, living in Palm Springs now, I just did a piece on the beautiful statue of Gene Autry that's out there along Gene Autry Trail. And in researching, I found out he has 5 stars.
If you're talking about trivia, that's a question we always ask people, so you get an A for knowing that he is the only one who has a star in all 5 categories. And people used to give Johnny Grant a bad time because they say, well, he was your mentor, or you gave him 5 stars. Well, that's not quite accurate. Gene Autry had 4 stars from the very beginning. They did give him a 5th star when they created the live performance category because, he was the singing cowboy. And so he is the only one who has 5. There's several that have 4, such as Bob Hope. I doubt if we'll ever see anyone else get 5 at this point. There's so much demand for these stars. It's very, very unlikely that we'll even give somebody a 2nd star at this point.
Well, and the other thing, too, I remember one time I was talking to Bob Hope about the fact that people in that generation, many of them were in burlesque, then vaudeville, then radio, live stage, movies, television. Their careers were so diversified, they lent themselves to that more than a lot of very two-dimensional people we have now. And not to sound totally critical.
Well, that's true. There are very few celebrities today that you could even think of that would qualify in all 5 categories.
I can't think of any. LeRon, can we step outside for a moment? I will tell everyone we're recording this on a very hot day in Los Angeles. We elected not to walk around for an hour on the street, but let's go outside for a minute. Mr. Gubler, let's wrap up here standing along the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's just a treasure trove of old and new and all kinds of industries. The first thing I saw was Sonny and Cher, but then there's Mary Margaret McBride, who was one of the first women to really be well-known in broadcasting at one time. Everybody's out here.
Yeah, it's a great historical feature that commemorates the entertainment industry and all 5 segments of the entertainment industry. So while a lot of the original stars, nobody remembers them anymore, the same thing's going to happen with the stars who we are installing today. In a few years, they won't remember them. But these stars will always be here. It's a national landmark, national treasure, and it commemorates people who really made a contribution of significance to our culture.
Now, there's another one here. This is kind of a little different than I'm used to seeing. It's an award of excellence, and I'm looking at this. to the Recording Academy. How many of these, I don't know how to, do you have a name for this type of star?
Well, these are not real stars on the Walk of Fame. They're actually on private property. This was a project that Johnny Grant did about 10 years ago. He was trying to raise money especially for preservation of the walk. And he had all these entities that wanted stars. And we don't honor organizations. We don't honor buildings. And so he created this idea of the Award of Excellence that would raise some extra money and would commemorate them. So there are actually, well, there's probably less than 10 of these. And we've stopped doing them because even though we tell people these are not stars on the Walk of Fame,
they sure look like
they still say, I've got a star on the Walk of Fame. And so we say, well, let's not do this again. It creates confusion. But it actually does commemorate some major institutions like the Hollywood Reporter, the Recording Academy, the KTLA, institutions that had an impact on Hollywood.
You know, one of the really bittersweet things I remember from the years I worked with UPI out here, the day that Jimmy Stewart died, his star is at Hollywood and Vine. And I went over there, and there were people putting wreaths down, kneeling there, sobbing, looking down at his star. It was an incredible moment.
You know, and that continues with every celebrity who passes away. When someone passes away, the trust will put a wreath of flowers on their star in their memory. But it becomes just by sheer, I don't know, what would you say? It would just say, to the public, it is a place they can gather and commemorate that celebrity. And so you will see all sorts of things, from messages, to candles, teddy bears left on a star. And perhaps the biggest incident that we had like this was when Michael Jackson died. We've never seen anything like it. They would come and leave things, and the stack was 3 or 4 feet high of things left by fans. And we'd leave it up for a few days and then remove it, and the next day it'd all be back with more commemorative items left in his memory. So it is a place that people come to remember that person. The media comes out to cover it and usually broadcasts from the star. When Elizabeth Taylor died, for example, they were out there saying, you know, what a great honoree.
Well, and you know, for example, that except for the stars that were given out posthumously, that the people represented by the star touched that. They were there. They were at that spot, or weren't they?
They weren't.
They weren't?
Not all of them.
Okay.
Now, you remember, the first 1,500 stars went down all at once. There was no ceremony for those first 1,500 stars.
I need a lot of asterisks here, I guess.
So, now, since that time, everybody who's gotten a star was there. So as the walk gets older and older, the ones that people are coming to, they were there. Okay. But the original 1,500 stars were laid, and there was no ceremony.
Now, are they all over the area or just in one place?
You know, part of the genius behind the Walk of Fame is then they created the walk. They created it and put in enough stars so it had presence. And they spread these stars through the whole 1.5 miles of the Walk of Fame. And then they had blank stars as placeholders for future stars. So you instantly had a tourist attraction, and you had a way to add stars so that you don't have all the old ones in one place and all the new ones in another. Now, in addition to that, as we began to fill it up, we came up with, people keep asking, well, what happens when you run out of space? Well, Johnny Grant came up with a quick solution. We'll just start another row. So that's why here you're looking and you see alternating stars. And so we have enough space for several hundred years worth of stars at this point.
Well, LERON, it is one of those great tourist attractions and treasures at the same time. Let me ask you one final thing. What does it feel like to now be at the forefront of all of this heritage and be able to present this to the public and preserve it?
It's a tremendous responsibility. I kind of feel the weight on my shoulders, certainly, as far as preserving this great institution and following in Johnny Grant's footsteps. You know, I'm the MC now for the ceremonies, and you know, people say, "Well, you're filling Johnny's shoes," and I say, "No, there was only one in Johnny Grant, and there will only be one Johnny Grant. I'm not filling his shoes. We're following and trying to preserve what he built. But it is a great institution. We try to preserve it without having too much commercialism, as well as presenting a memorial to these stars and celebrities that will always be there for everyone."
Do you remember the first one you did on your own?
You know, there were a couple. Suzanne Plachette was one of the very first ones I did. And this was right after Johnny died, then she died. And so we said, well, should we go ahead with the ceremony? And we said, well, you know, we should, because she died only 2 weeks before the ceremony was scheduled. We went ahead with the ceremony, which was right at the corner of Hollywood and Highland, and it turned out to be a very nice memorial for her.
Well, I can tell you this, during the years I worked here, coming to the ceremonies, I really look forward to it. Not only were they well done, the security was great, everybody was in a good mood, but also it was a great opportunity for reporters such as myself to interview other people, because I'm trying to remember who it was, but Jack Lemmon was at the ceremony, and Johnny Wooden was at the ceremony. It was for one of the sports broadcasters. But there's a lot of ancillary fun that goes with these ceremonies. You
know, there really is. Quite often they'll have a guest celebrity come to speak on their behalf. Now, this week we had our last ceremony for Sissy Spacek. We had Bill Paxton there and director David Lynch. It's a very fun ceremony. Yeah. Both very charming men. David Lynch was very funny, and Bill Paxton was a real gentleman as well. So, and the fans loved it. And of course, Sissy Spacek, what a wonderful, wonderful honoree. So you come out to these, and they are special. Every ceremony is different and in its own way very special.
Give us the website again. It's very simple.
It's walkoffame.com.
walkoffame.com. Mr. Gubler, thank you very much. This has been great fun. I'm going to spend about the next 3 hours now seeing how many of these stars I recognize.
Well, good. You know, there's a history. The nice thing is, now that I've been around so long, I can remember the history between a lot of these ceremonies. Here, you've got Patrick Swayze here. We gave him his star, and again, a great, great honoree. People were of course, we were all saddened when he passed away. But I recall he was late for his ceremony, and one thing Johnny Grant hated was to start ceremonies late. And in fact, he was about a half hour late. And Johnny would usually, if the celebrity was late, he would start without them. But on that occasion, he did wait for Patrick Swayze to arrive. So that was a fun one. Sonny and Cher. You know, Sonny wasn't here. He passed away. He had that skiing accident. And shortly after that, we went ahead and scheduled his ceremony. His star had been approved. Their star had been approved many years. So Cher was here, and Sonny's wife, Mary Bono, were here for that ceremony. Meryl Streep, we did her. I remember her coming and talking about, she says, Johnny, she says, I'm from New Jersey, and usually when they talk about putting you in cement in New Jersey, it has a little different connotation. So there's a little bit of history with each of these stars. So they're very meaningful for me.
I just saw Louis Armstrong's star over here. Do you know whether that was posthumous or whether he was here?
Well, that was one of the original stars put in 1960. So I'm not sure. I believe he was still living in 1960, but he would not have been here for that ceremony.
You know, if we keep this up, we'll be here another 4 hours. I better say thank you again.
All right. Well, nice to be with you.
I hope you enjoyed this interview from my new American Montage series. Check out YouTube for more. I'm Dennis Daly.